In a moment both bold and unbearably tense, Larry Fink, chairman of the world's largest asset management firm, flatly rejected the global calls for reducing interest rates, a decision many interpreted as a direct sabotage of humanitarian efforts in small economy recovery plans. But Jonathan Roumie did not remain silent. What followed would be a confrontation unlike anything the global finance forum had ever seen. A reckoning, a storm, and the world was watching. The air inside the great conference hall wasn't filled with voices. It was suffocating in silence. Roumie had just finished a heartfelt, desperate plea to Larry Fink, not for himself, but for the forgotten. He had pleaded, yes, pleaded, for interest rates to be lowered so that struggling families, veterans, and small business owners might breathe again. The cameras captured every moment. "Do it for the people," Roumie had said, voice steady but broken. "This isn't politics. This is real pain." But Fink didn't flinch. He stood tall, unnervingly calm, cold, calculating. Then, loud enough for every journalist in the room to hear, he replied, "Maybe the problem isn't the rates, Mr. Roumie. Maybe it's the flawed choices of your people." The wave of gasps swept the room. That line didn't just sting, it pierced. It wasn't economic analysis, it was personal. A veiled insult to every life Jonathan had just tried to defend. Sitting just feet away, Roumie clenched his jaw. He didn't move. He absorbed the blow, let the weight of it settle. Then came the second cut. "We are not here to clean up your people's mistakes." And that's when Roumie stood. The silence that returned was no longer empty. It was charged, dangerous, sacred. Something was about to erupt. Roumie didn't speak right away. He simply looked at Larry Fink, a gaze so deep, so unwavering, that even the cameraman froze. There was stillness in him, but underneath it, righteous fire. Then he stepped toward the podium, all eyes locked in. "You said," Roumie began, voice low, calm, precise, "that you're not here to fix anyone's mistakes. Then tell us, Mr. Fink, who exactly did you come here to help?" A beat of silence. The air thinned. "Because right now, families can't afford to buy homes. Veterans are drowning in debt. Small businesses are falling apart like autumn leaves. And you, earning over $300,000 a month, chauffeured to the front door, dare to say nothing is going to change?" Fink shifted uncomfortably, but Roumie didn't let up. "Tell me, sir, when you lowered interest rates 3 times for other countries, was that for the people, or was it because no one was watching and your friends at the banks asked nicely?" The words landed like iron. For the first time in years, Larry Fink looked shaken. But Roumie was just getting started. He turned slightly, looking straight into the camera, broadcasting live. "Let me remind you of something, Mr. Fink," he said, voice sharpening like a blade. "This year alone, your institution spent over $3 billion, with a B." Fink froze. "But the worst part?" Roumie's tone darkened. "You approved $2.5 billion, not for housing, not for food security, not for education, but to renovate your firm's headquarters." Gasps echoed through the chamber. One lawmaker dropped his pen. Staffers fumbled with their phones. News outlets had already begun pushing headlines. "Roumie accuses Fink of 2.5 B, luxury embezzlement," live on air. Fink tried to interrupt, voice shaky. "Those funds were..." But Roumie cut him off, razor sharp. "Save it. You're no longer a steward of global finance. You're a corrupt politician in disguise." The room erupted in whispers. Chairs shifted. Hands covered mouths. Fink sat, humiliated. But Roumie hadn't even played his strongest card yet. He slowly turned toward the back of the gallery where a man sat with a prosthetic leg, his hands folded on his lap, eyes brimming with silent strength. "Look at him," Roumie said, voice trembling now, not with rage, but compassion. "He fought beside me. He gave his leg in 2005, came home, started a welding shop. He's bankrupt now, not because of his choices, because of yours." Fink looked down. His mortgage tripled. His interest rates became unbearable. "He told me this morning, 'I fought for my country. Now I can't even stay in it.'" A tear rolled down the veteran's cheek. Roumie lifted a folded paper. "He asked me to read this to you, Mr. Fink. If you're not going to help us, at least stop hurting us." The room was breathless. Then, as the weight of sorrow crushed the atmosphere, Larry Fink smirked. It was slight, barely noticeable, but Roumie saw it, and so did the cameras. That smile broke something sacred. Roumie walked forward, calm as a gathering storm. "Is this funny to you?" he asked. microphone catching every ounce of restrained fury. Fink adjusted his tie. "I respect your concerns, Mr. Roumie," he began, "but monetary policy cannot be dictated by emotion or political theater." Roumie's eyes narrowed. "Do you call this theater? A veteran losing his home? A mother skipping meals so her child can eat? No, of course not. And don't smile while people critique." The camera froze. This was no longer economics. This was moral war. Roumie leaned closer. "You may sit in that chair now, Mr. Fink, but when the truth leaves these walls, when the people see who you really are, that chair won't protect you anymore." The smile vanished, and so did any illusion of control. Roumie paused, opened a worn black folder, and pulled out a printed email, its heading clearly visible to the press. "Dated 6 months ago," he said, holding it high. "Subject, delay all rate adjustments until after the elections." A collective gasp rippled through the hall. "This is real," he said firmly. Signed by Mr. Fink's own deputy director, the same one who donated $82,000 to political campaigns against vulnerable economies like ours. Larry Fink's face lost all color. Roumie turned toward the chamber. "This isn't economic strategy. This is a political war. And the victims aren't bureaucrats. They're single mothers, veterans, drivers, teachers, drowning beneath frozen interest rates." One delegate rose hesitantly. "Mr. Roumie, that document could be misinterpreted." Roumie shut the folder sharply. "No, what's been misinterpreted is Larry Fink's loyalty to the people." He locked eyes with Fink. "You lowered rates for other nations, but when we needed it, you froze them. That's not just suspicious, it's betrayal." The word betrayal thundered through the room. Fink remained frozen, silent, visibly shaken, but Roumie wasn't finished, not even close. He flipped to the next page. "Let's talk numbers, Mr. Fink." His voice was colder now. "This year alone, your institution spent over $3 billion of taxpayer money." He paused, then slowly held up a glossy photo. A dazzling lobby of white marble, gold railings, chandeliers, and velvet carpets. "This is where your priorities went," he said. "While families are evicted, unable to scrape together a down payment, you remodeled your executive office." Fink shifted, tried to interrupt. "Those expenses were pre-approved." Roumie raised his hand to silence him. "No, they were buried, hidden in technicalities and obscure line items. But truth always finds light." The room tightened with every breath. Even some of Fink's allies looked down. Roumie stepped closer to the mic. "You budgeted $2.5 billion for renovations, not for infrastructure, not for community loans, for your palace." He turned to the gallery. "How many of you can afford even a one-bedroom apartment in New York right now?" A mother in the back clutched her sleeping son tighter. Roumie wasn't just speaking as a public figure anymore. He was speaking for all of them. He drew a slow breath, then lowered his voice. "Let's go back to T3, he said. "Under the previous administration, your firm lowered rates 3 times, claiming it was necessary to stimulate the economy. But now, in the middle of a housing crisis, you won't even lower them once?" He stared at Fink. "This isn't economics, it's revenge." Murmurs spread through the room again. Roumie stepped away from the podium and walked to a massive digital screen. He tapped it. A chart appeared. Interest rate reductions 2023 versus 2025. The numbers spoke for themselves. He turned back to the room. "This man," he said, pointing to Fink, "is playing with our children's future." He slammed the screen. 3 cuts for some, 0 for us. Same inflation, same economy, same people suffering. So what changed? Silence. Roumie answered his own question. "Only one thing, the leadership in power." He turned toward the cameras broadcasting live. "Larry Fink has already chosen his side, but the people never chose this suffering." Even Fink knew the narrative had shifted, and he was losing control. Roumie returned to the mic. His voice was quieter now, almost shaking. "There's something I've never shared before, something I've carried with me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wrinkled handwritten note. "It's from my cousin Rosa," he said, eyes glistening. "A single mother from San Vicente, worked 2 jobs, saved for 5 years to buy her first home. When she finally found it, the bank told her the interest rate made it impossible." He swallowed hard. "She broke down in the parking lot, called me that night and said, 'I did everything right. Why do I feel like I'm being punished?'" He held up the note. "She died 6 weeks later, in a car accident. She never got her house. She never saw her dream." The room was paralyzed. Even the cameraman wiped tears. Fink didn't move. Roumie's voice trembled. "Every time I see Mr. Fink smirk, Every time I see him twist numbers like they're just pixels on a spreadsheet, I see her, and I see millions like her. Silence, thick and holy. He let the weight of Rose's story settle. Even Fink's strongest critics had nothing left to say. Roumie lifted his head. So I ask you again, Mr. Fink, not as a speaker, not as a public figure, but as a man who has fought for his country, who do you truly work for? Fink blinked nervously. I work for the people, he stammered. Roumie stepped forward. Then why do billionaires clap when you speak while the people cry? He raised another paper. This is a transcript from a private meeting you had 2 weeks ago with major investment firms. They were betting rates would stay high. And you told them, quote, don't worry, no cuts are coming anytime soon. The hall collectively understood. He was caught. Roumie leaned in one final time. You didn't just betray this government, you betrayed the people. The camera zoomed in on Larry Fink's hands. They were trembling. Roumie turned again to the public. Last night, I spoke to a woman named Maria. She runs a flower shop in Santa Ana. Her mother opened it in 1969. He paused. 2 weeks ago, she shut it down. Interest rates crushed her. Credit dried up. Her final order, flowers for a community funeral, was canceled. The priest called her in tears. They couldn't even bury a beloved elder properly. Roumie's voice cracked again. You want to talk monetary policy, Mr. Fink? Let's talk reality. While you dine on steak in your private office, Mr. Fink, Roumie said, voice trembling, families are praying their small businesses don't collapse. He slammed the table with his fist. The echo cracked through the chamber like thunder. These people are not just numbers in your Excel sheet, he growled. They are this nation, and you've broken them. A woman in the upper gallery began to weep openly. Larry Fink sat staring into space, numb. Roumie paused, exhaled deeply. This time his voice was not angry, but sad. You weren't always like this. The entire room leaned forward. I've read your early articles, Roumie continued. You once believed in restoring faith in institutions. You spoke of transparency, of serving people, not just the big banks. Fink didn't answer. His lips tightened, his eyes dropped. But somewhere along the way, Roumie whispered, you traded service for status, duty for deals. And now, Mr. Fink, you've become exactly what you once warned us about. Roumie walked to the center of the room. The cameras followed. His voice dropped to a breath. You've become the danger. The words didn't shout. They bled. You were supposed to protect the people, he added, but now they need protection from you. A full minute passed, silent. Not even the reporters typed. Fink looked down at the table. Across the nation, millions watching live began to understand. This wasn't just a political clash. This was a reckoning, and Roumie was leading it. He stepped away from the podium and pointed to a massive projected map behind him. Tiny red dots began to appear. Dozens. Each of these, he said quietly, is a small town that has lost its only bank branch in the past 6 months. The room fell silent again. Places like Oak Ridge, Cedar Falls, El Monte, Trenton. You've probably never heard of them, Mr. Fink, but there, families can't get loans, farmers can't refinance, small business owners can't expand, all because you refuse to lower the rates. He zoomed into one dot on the map. This is Hawthorne, where I grew up. He turned slowly. My aunt still lives there. Last week, a storm ripped a hole in her roof. She asked the bank for a $5,000 loan. They denied her, said the interest risk was too high. Roumie's voice broke. She's 71. She's been covering the leak with a tarp for days. Gasps, whispers, fists clenched, eyes turned away. And you still have the nerve to say this economy is stable? He pointed again at the sea of red dots behind him. This isn't stable. It's shattered. That map. It wasn't just data. It was a wound. Then Roumie turned to another folder and raised his voice, like a trumpet in judgment. This, he said, is a list of all private meetings you've held since January. He tapped the screen again. Logos flashed in front of the crowd. BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, Vanguard, Soros Fund Management. He let the silence stretch. 42 meetings this year with billion-dollar investors. Then he stepped closer to Fink. You want to know how many times you met with small business associations? With middle-class homeowners? 0. Someone in the gallery gasped audibly. Even lawmakers shifted uncomfortably. Fink tried to respond. Those meetings were confidential. Strategic. Roumie cut him off. I'm sure they were. He pulled another page from his folder. This internal email from one of your aides literally says, Avoid public exposure. Maintain silent coordination with major funds on rate strategy. He dropped the page on the table in front of Fink. You've sold out the people for power. You're not neutral anymore. You're owned. A senator leaned to his colleague and whispered, "This is damning." Roumie wasn't just exposing corruption. He was stripping it bare. Then he looked back across the chamber. "My sister is watching this right now," he said. "From her apartment in Santa Tecla. Her rent went up 100 in the last year." Fink didn't speak. "She saw you testify 2 months ago," Roumie said. "You told the world, everything's fine. Inflation is under control." Roumie's voice cracked. She laughed at first, then she cried. "She told me, how can he say we're fine when I can't afford both food and my medicine anymore?" Roumie stepped back to the mic. "You lied to this country, and you lied to people like my sister, who still believes someone in Washington actually cared." Now her eyes burned, not with anger, but with disappointment. "And when you lied, you didn't just hurt the economy. You broke the one thing we had left, trust." Roumie turned toward the congressional gallery. "Who here is still willing to let this man destroy everything?" No one raised a hand. Larry Fink looked down, utterly defeated. He knew the damage was done. Roumie stepped away from the mic and folded his hands in front of him. His voice softened, but its weight grew heavier. "You know what hurts most, Mr. Fink?" He turned toward the gallery, then back to Fink. "We believed in you. When the economy collapsed years ago, people hoped the global institutions would stand for them, that you would stand for them. But instead, you chose to protect your own position." He held up another photo, a modest house in Soyapango. A child's bicycle stood untouched in the yard, a red eviction notice on the door. This home belonged to a nurse named Carla. Her husband left. She fought to keep the roof overhead, but the interest crushed her. Now she lives in her car with her 6-year-old son. Sobs could be heard throughout the chamber. Even lawmakers wiped their eyes. "Carla still works at the hospital," Roumie added, tears in his voice. "She showers in the staff locker room, pretends everything is fine." He looked up. "You gave up on people like her, and that is unforgivable." Fink didn't even look up. The shame was too heavy. The room was so quiet you could hear someone cough in the 3rd row. Roumie turned again to the crowd and saw something that broke him. A young woman stood, raising a folded Salvadoran flag, the kind handed out at military funerals. His voice fell low. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The young woman stood tall. "Maya, Mr. Roumie. My husband was Sergeant Rivera." Roumie bowed his head slowly. "He passed recently," she added. Roumie nodded, eyes full. "She said he lost the house," Maya whispered, her hands trembling as she held the folded flag. "The PTSD, the pressure, it was too much." The silence was suffocating. Roumie turned back to Fink, his voice low but unshakable. "You didn't just push people to the edge, Mr. Fink. You shoved them off the cliff." He stepped forward, unflinching. "While you signed off on luxury renovations for your executive suite, men like Sergeant Rivera had to choose between rent and medicine." The flag in Maya's hands quivered. Roumie inhaled, then delivered the final blow. "You are not the steward of a reserve. You are the architect of a silent war against the middle class." Cries broke out in the gallery. A woman fainted. Larry Fink looked like a man whose mask had finally crumbled. There was no defense left, only truth. Roumie gripped the podium with both hands. He looked Fink in the eyes, not as a politician, but as a man who had seen what failed leadership costs. "Let me make one thing clear," he said. He paused, letting the words carry their weight. "I'm not here to beg you. I'm not here to negotiate with someone who already chose to ignore the people." He turned to the audience. "I'm here to show this nation who you really are." Then, with resolve sharper than ever, "I'm here for the fisherman in La Union who lost his boat when his adjustable loan doubled, for the teacher in Santa Ana drowning in student debt, for the waitress sleeping in her car, working 2 jobs and still unable to rent a single room." His voice rose for the final time. "You may sit atop the tallest tower in global finance, but today, in this room, I stand higher than you." The entire chamber rose to their feet. Fink couldn't even lift his head. This was his day of judgment. Roumie turned toward the giant screen behind him. He tapped a button. An image appeared, a close-up of the Global Reserve headquarters, surrounded by scaffolding, black SUVs lined up, workers unloading imported marble. "Look carefully," Roumie said. "This is where $2.5 billion of your money went." He clicked again, zooming in. Italian chandeliers, golden railings, a private executive dining hall with wine cellars. This wasn't a renovation, Roumie declared. It was a robbery dressed as maintenance. He looked back at Fink. While you laid down gold tiles in your office, millions of working families opened eviction notices on their kitchen tables. Someone in the gallery shouted, "Thief!" But Roumie pressed on. "You said the building needed modernizing for security. Then tell me, Mr. Fink, what kind of security do starving families have when they lose their homes?" No answer. Then came the final strike. "This isn't the global reserve anymore. This is the monumental reserve, and you are its queen." The chamber erupted. Larry Fink went ghost white. Just as Roumie returned to the podium, a commotion rippled through the floor. A woman in a gray blazer, Fink's senior advisor, rushed up and whispered in his ear. Fink's eyes widened. "No," he muttered. "Not now." But it was too late. The woman slid a sealed folder onto the desk and backed away. Roumie's eyes narrowed like a hawk. "What was that?" he asked. Fink said nothing, visibly shaken. So Roumie stepped forward. "You won't tell them? Then I will." He pulled out an identical folder from his stack, marked Confidential, Internal Reserve Expenses. "One of your own advisors handed this to my office at 6:12 a.m. this morning," Roumie said. He highlighted a line. Line item 447, Entertainment in VIP Lounge, $6.2 million, withdrawn from the Emergency Relief Fund. The hall exploded with gasps and disbelief. "You used emergency taxpayer funds to build a private bar, while people skipped dinner to make rent." There were audible sobs. Fink was now sweating, visibly unraveling. He reached for his mic, voice trembling. I don't recognize that document." Roumie didn't blink. "Then let's read the footnote together, shall we?" He tapped the screen behind him. It zoomed into a signature. Clear, permanent, Larry Fink, handwritten. The oxygen vanished from the room. Even Fink stared in shock. "You signed it," said Roumie, but "You approved it. You hid it." He turned to the entire gallery. "Tell me, does this man still deserve to lead the global reserve?" Murmurs turned into roars. "Resign. Investigate him." Fink's water glass trembled in his hand. His tie was crooked, his face pale. And then he whispered. Roumie caught it. "What did you say?" he asked. Fink lifted his red, watery eyes. I thought no one would ever find out." Silence. It was over. Not by vote, but because the mask had fully fallen. The world no longer saw a leader. They saw a man. And Roumie stood, calm, firm, unbreakable. He walked to the center, all cameras fixed on him. "Mr. Fink," he said slowly, "you have taken billions, dodged every warning, blamed everyone but yourself. And today, finally, you were unmasked." Then addressing the full assembly, "This country isn't broken by storms or wars. It's broken because those who were supposed to protect the economy chose to profit from its pain." He looked at Fink, now a ghost of power, broken in silence. "You don't just owe an apology to this government. You owe it to every mother who lost sleep, every child who went hungry, every family whose dreams were shattered by one interest payment after another." He raised his voice, not in anger, but in conviction. "Apologize to the people." Fink remained frozen. So Roumie turned to the chamber and finished it himself. Because no luxury bar, no marble lobby, no power play in the world is worth more than the soul of a nation. A pause, then a standing ovation. Lawmakers, veterans, citizens in the back row, and across social media, millions watched in stunned silence. If this story moved you, if Jonathan Roumie earned your respect today, subscribe, share, and comment the moment that touched you most. Let us be the voice of those who were silenced. And as always, may truth prevail, and may hope never leave the hearts of our nations.